Have you ever walked into a room and watched the mood instantly change? You didn't raise your voice, didn't start drama, didn't even say anything, yet somehow people still became awkward around you. Fake smiles appeared out of nowhere. Certain people suddenly got defensive. Others started performing harder than usual, talking louder, acting different, trying to control the energy in the room. And you felt it immediately, didn't you? That strange tension people create around someone who's simply being real. Listen closely. Pretenders are allergic to authenticity. Your presence forces people to confront parts of themselves they spend years trying to hide. That's why some people dislike you before they even know you, because your energy doesn't participate in the illusion. You are a walking mirror, and mirrors are dangerous to people who survive through deception. Most people were taught how to perform, not how to heal. They learned how to sound confident instead of becoming secure, how to appear kind instead of being genuine, how to collect attention instead of building character. So when someone enters the room carrying realness, discernment, emotional depth, and quiet confidence, it disrupts everything. Not because you're trying to intimidate anybody, but because authenticity naturally exposes artificiality. And for years, you probably blamed yourself for that reaction. You replayed conversations in your head, wondered if you were too serious, too distant, too intense. But here's the truth they never wanted you to realize. Your existence threatens people who built their identity around masks. Not because you attacked them, but because your calm presence silently asks a question they don't want to answer. Who are you when nobody's performing? Sit with that for a second, because the next part explains why this clash was never personal. It was spiritual. Number 1, the collision of two worlds. Here's what people don't understand about your energy. You're not operating from the same place they are. That's the real tension. This was never just a personality clash. It's a collision between two completely different ways of existing. One side is built on performance. The other is built on truth. And truth has a way of making performance look exhausting. You ever notice how certain people become uncomfortable around you even when you're completely calm? You're minding your business, staying grounded, speaking honestly, and somehow they still react like you challenged them personally. That reaction isn't random. Your presence interrupts the image they worked hard to maintain. Because a lot of people are not living from their real selves. They're living from survival masks. Masks built from insecurity, validation-seeking, competition, manipulation, and fear. They learned early in life that being authentic didn't get them attention, protection, or approval, so they created characters instead. Characters that sound impressive. Characters that look confident. Characters designed to control how other people perceive them. But then you walk into the room carrying something they cannot manufacture. Realness. And that's where the disturbance begins. See, authenticity is quiet. It doesn't force itself onto people. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't need constant applause. Real people don't spend all day trying to convince others they're real. They just are. And ironically, that silent confidence terrifies people who built their identity around external validation. Because your energy reminds them of how disconnected they are from themselves. Listen, people can tolerate fake confidence because it follows the social script. They know how to respond to it. They know how to play along. But authentic people are unpredictable to manipulators because authenticity cannot be controlled through image management. You don't fold easily. You don't worship status. You don't automatically trust charm. You pay attention to energy, inconsistency, tone shifts, hidden motives. And manipulative people feel that immediately. That's why some individuals start acting strange around you before any conflict even happens. They sense they can't fully manipulate your perception. Their usual tactics don't land the same way. The flirting feels empty to you. The forced charisma feels rehearsed. The fake humility feels strategic. And even if you never call it out verbally, they know you see it. That silent awareness becomes unbearable for pretenders. And be honest, you've probably experienced moments where people randomly projected hostility onto you even though you did nothing wrong. Maybe group chats suddenly became quiet when you spoke. Maybe coworkers acted overly competitive for no reason. Maybe certain family members treated your peace like arrogance. Maybe fake friends started excluding you the moment you stopped performing for their approval. That's not because you became weaker. It's because your authenticity disrupted the emotional ecosystem they depended on. See, fake environments require participation. Everyone silently agrees to maintain the illusion. Nobody says what they really feel. Nobody confronts the obvious. Everybody performs politeness while resentment grows underneath the surface. Everybody smiles while secretly competing. Everybody pretends. Then you show up refusing to play the game. And your refusal alone exposes the entire system. This is why spiritually aware people often end up isolated for periods of their life. Not because they're cursed, but because truth naturally separates itself from environments built on illusion. And painful as that separation feels sometimes, it's protection. Because staying authentic in a performative world requires courage. A lot of courage. Especially when people punish honesty, but reward manipulation. Especially when being genuine costs you invitations, relationships, opportunities, or approval. But here's the deeper truth. Every time you refuse to betray yourself just to fit in, you strengthen something inside you that fake people can never replicate. An unshakable core. And that core is exactly why your presence unsettles them now. Because no matter how polished their mask looks, some part of them realizes you are free in a way they are not. Let that sink in for a second, because the next part gets even deeper. We're going to talk about why manipulative people feel emotionally exposed around you, even when you never say a word. Number 2, the unspoken exposure. This is where it gets uncomfortable for manipulative people, because your presence exposes them without you even trying. You don't have to argue. You don't have to call them out publicly. You don't have to win against them. In fact, most of the time, you're simply observing. Quiet, calm, reading the energy. But somehow that silence alone makes certain people panic. Why? Because people who survive through manipulation rely heavily on controlling perception. They study reactions. They test boundaries. They pay attention to what impresses people, what intimidates people, what earns trust quickly. A lot of their confidence isn't real confidence at all. It's calculated positioning. But then they meet someone like you. Someone who isn't hypnotized by appearances. And suddenly their normal tactics stop working. That's the part they can't stand. See, manipulators are used to people responding automatically to charm, status, attractiveness, popularity, money, social performance, or emotional pressure. They know how to create personas that keep others emotionally hooked. But your energy slows everything down. You observe before attaching. You feel before trusting. You notice contradictions most people ignore. And even when you stay respectful, they feel exposed under your awareness. You ever notice how toxic people start over-explaining themselves around you? Or how certain individuals become weirdly defensive without being accused of anything? That's exposure anxiety. Your discernment activates their insecurity because deep down they know you can sense the disconnect between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. And listen carefully, people hate being emotionally read when they're hiding something. That's why some individuals will randomly accuse you of judging them when you barely said anything. The truth is, your silence forces them into self-awareness. And self-awareness becomes torture for people who spent years avoiding themselves. You become a mirror they cannot manipulate. Now watch this. Most manipulators feel powerful when they can provoke emotional reactions from others. They like confusion. They like emotional chaos. They like making people chase clarity, approval, validation, or explanations. But your energy interrupts that cycle because you don't react the way they expect. You pause. You observe. You detach. You notice patterns. And that emotional discipline makes them feel powerless. Because suddenly they can't predict you. This is why some toxic people try harder around you. The fake kindness increases. The charm becomes exaggerated. The love bombing becomes obvious. The subtle intimidation tactics intensify. They throw different masks at you hoping one of them will work. But when none of it fully lands, frustration starts building underneath their performance. And eventually the mask slips. That's when you start hearing strange labels attached to your character. You're hard to read. You think you're better than people. You're intimidating. You're too serious. You make people uncomfortable. Listen, most of the time, what they actually mean is this: I can't control how you see me. That loss of control terrifies manipulative personalities, especially because your discernment forces them to confront a painful reality. Charisma can impress people, but it cannot create genuine depth. And deep down, they know the difference. That's why your energy bothers people who depend on performance. Around others, they can maintain the illusion easily. Around you, they start feeling emotionally naked. They sense that you're paying attention to what's underneath the words, underneath the image, underneath the smile. And here's the powerful part: you don't even have to expose them publicly. Life eventually does it for you. Because fake personas are exhausting to maintain long-term. Sooner or later, inconsistency reveals itself. The lies stop matching. The masks crack under pressure. The manipulation becomes visible. And the same people who once defended them start noticing the energy you sensed from the beginning. You know what's painful, though? A lot of you spent years shrinking your intuition just to avoid making other people uncomfortable. You ignored red flags. You doubted your discernment. You forced yourself to give endless chances because you didn't want to seem judgmental. But your spirit was reading truth long before your mind accepted it. That uneasy feeling around certain people? It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't paranoia. It was discernment trying to protect you. And the more connected you become to yourself, the harder it becomes for fake energy to hide from you. That's why your presence unsettles pretenders now. Not because you attack them, but because your authenticity silently removes their hiding place. And the next part explains why they respond to that exposure by projecting their own insecurities onto you. Pay attention, because this is where the labels, accusations, and smear campaigns begin. Number 3, they're desperate projections. Once manipulative people realize they can't control you, charm you, or fully read you, the next phase begins: projection. And this is where a lot of spiritually aware people start questioning themselves, because suddenly they're being labeled in ways that don't even match their behavior. Out of nowhere, you become too intense, too quiet, too difficult, too sensitive, too cold, or somehow the problem simply because you stopped participating in fake dynamics. But listen carefully. Projection is what happens when people cannot handle what your authenticity reflects back to them. Instead of confronting their own insecurity, they assign it to you. Instead of admitting they feel exposed, they accuse you of being judgmental. Instead of acknowledging their manipulation failed, they paint you as arrogant, difficult, or emotionally distant. Because protecting the ego matters more to them than facing the truth. And honestly, you've probably seen this happen in subtle ways your entire life. You walk into a group calmly, and suddenly someone starts competing with you for attention, even though you weren't competing with anybody. You stay quiet, and people assume you think you're better than them. You set one healthy boundary, and suddenly you're mean. You stop over-explaining yourself, and now they call you secretive. Why? Because people reveal themselves through the stories they create about you. Healthy people don't feel threatened by authenticity. Manipulative people do. That's the difference. See, projection is a defense mechanism. It allows insecure people to avoid accountability by turning you into the emotional container for everything they refuse to face inside themselves. If they feel fake around you, they'll call you fake. If they feel intimidated, they'll accuse you of acting superior. If they feel emotionally shallow, they'll say you're too deep or trying too hard. But here's the disturbing part. Groups often join in without even realizing it. Because once one insecure person labels you negatively, others start viewing you through that distorted lens. That's how smear campaigns quietly begin. Not always through dramatic attacks, but through whispers, tone changes, exclusion, weird tension, fake concern, subtle disrespect. Little social punishments designed to pressure you back into performing. And be honest, Some of you know exactly what that feels like. The room goes quiet when you speak. Invitations slowly disappear. People become passive-aggressive instead of direct. Fake friends start acting uncomfortable around your growth. Family members mock your healing journey. Coworkers suddenly become competitive after you stop people-pleasing. All because your authenticity disrupted the emotional balance they benefited from. Listen, toxic environments depend on unconscious participation. Everybody plays a role. One person manipulates. One enables. One stays silent. One performs perfection. One becomes the scapegoat. And when the scapegoat finally wakes up and stops carrying everybody else's dysfunction, the entire system gets exposed. That's why they react so emotionally when you change. Not because your growth hurt them, but because your growth removed the illusion that their behavior was normal. And instead of respecting your transformation, many people will try to reduce you back to the version of yourself they could control. That's why they suddenly start bringing up old mistakes, old versions of you, old insecurities. They need you emotionally small again because your confidence forces them to confront their own stagnation. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. If being authentic makes fake people uncomfortable, that discomfort is not your responsibility. Read that again internally. You are not required to betray yourself just to make manipulative people feel safe in their illusion. You are not obligated to shrink your discernment to protect fragile egos. And you do not need to explain your depth to people committed to misunderstanding you. Because real recognizes real. The people meant for your life won't feel threatened by your honesty, your peace, your boundaries, or your emotional intelligence. They won't need you to perform confusion just so they can feel superior. They won't punish you for being grounded. Only insecure people feel attacked by someone who is genuinely at peace with themselves. And this is where it gets powerful. The more you stop defending yourself against false projections, the weaker those projections become. Because eventually people notice something important. Despite all the labels placed on you, your energy remains calm, consistent, and real. Meanwhile, the people attacking you keep exposing themselves through bitterness, gossip, manipulation, and emotional chaos. Truth has a strange way of revealing itself over time. And in the next part, we're going to talk about why your ability to see through fake charisma completely short-circuits the ego of pretenders. This part right here, it explains why some people become obsessed with gaining your validation and furious when they can't. Number 4, the failure of their charisma. This is the part pretenders never prepare for. Because most of their power comes from one thing: influence. The ability to charm people, impress people, emotionally hook people, and control perception before anyone looks deeper. And for a long time, that strategy probably worked perfectly for them. They learned how to say the right things, wear the right mask, mirror the right emotions, and create the image people wanted to believe. But then they met you, and for the first time in a long time, the performance didn't land. That's what bruised their ego. See, fake charisma depends on emotional blindness. It depends on people ignoring inconsistency because the packaging looks attractive. But your spirit pays attention to what's underneath the performance. You notice when someone's kindness feels transactional. You notice when confidence feels rehearsed. You notice when somebody's words sound polished, but their energy feels empty. And manipulators hate that. Because most people react to appearance first. You react to alignment. That changes everything. You've probably experienced moments where someone expected you to instantly admire them, chase them, praise them, or emotionally submit to their personality. And when you didn't, their entire energy toward you shifted. Suddenly the warmth disappeared. The passive aggression started. The subtle disrespect showed up. Not because you harmed them, but because your discernment interrupted the validation they were expecting to receive. Listen carefully. People addicted to admiration take neutrality as rejection. And your calmness forces them to work harder for attention they normally receive easily. That's why some individuals become weirdly obsessed with your approval. They can feel that your validation would mean something real because you don't hand it out cheaply. You're not easily hypnotized by status, charm, money, attractiveness, popularity, or loud confidence. You actually observe character. And that terrifies performative people because character is the one thing they cannot fake forever. Now watch this. The reason your presence short-circuits fake charisma is because authentic people value congruence over image. You care whether someone's energy matches their words, whether their private behavior matches their public persona, whether their kindness still exists when nobody's watching. Pretenders can sense that immediately around you, and suddenly all their usual tools start malfunctioning. The flirting feels forced. The bragging feels empty. The fake humility feels strategic. The charm feels rehearsed. And even if you never say any of that out loud, they feel your discernment anyway. That's why some people become irritated simply because you stayed emotionally neutral around them. Your lack of fascination forces them to confront something painful. Not everybody is impressed by performance anymore. You see, manipulators don't just want attention. They want control over perception. They want to decide how you see them. So when somebody remains grounded enough to form their own conclusions independently, it creates panic underneath the surface. Especially because your energy exposes the difference between attention and respect. A lot of people can attract attention. Realness earns respect. And deep down, pretenders know they're starving for something they cannot manufacture authentically. That's why some of them secretly study you while pretending not to like you. They watch your calmness, your boundaries, your emotional discipline, the way you don't beg for validation, the way you stay true to yourself even when misunderstood. Part of them envies the freedom you carry naturally, because they know how exhausting it is to constantly maintain an image. Meanwhile, your power comes from not needing one. Sit with that for a second. The strongest energy in the room is usually the person who doesn't need to control the room at all. And that's exactly why your presence unsettles fake people so deeply. Your authenticity reminds them that real peace cannot be performed. It has to be lived. Number 5, the unshakable core. After everything you've been through, this is the part you need to understand most. Your authenticity was never a weakness. It was the foundation of your protection. Yes, being real in a fake world can feel lonely sometimes. There were moments you questioned yourself. Moments you wondered whether life would be easier if you just played the game like everyone else. Smile when you don't mean it. Pretend not to notice disrespect. Stay quiet to keep the peace. Shrink yourself to make insecure people comfortable. But your spirit wouldn't let you live that way for long, because something inside you values inner peace more than social approval. And that's rare. See, pretenders may win temporary attention, but authenticity wins peace. Real peace. The kind that lets you sleep at night without replaying manipulations in your head. The kind that doesn't require 20 different masks depending on who's in the room. The kind that frees you from constantly performing just to feel accepted. That's the reward they don't talk about enough. No begging, no chasing, no pretending, just alignment. And people who abandoned themselves a long time ago secretly envy that freedom. Listen, every betrayal you survived sharpened your discernment. Every exclusion taught you who truly values you. Every fake friendship revealed the importance of boundaries. Every lonely season forced you to build a relationship with yourself instead of depending on external validation. What they meant to use against you became the very thing that strengthened you. That's why your energy feels different now. There's less desperation in you, less need to prove yourself, less attachment to being understood by everybody. You've realized something powerful. People committed to misunderstanding you would never be satisfied no matter how much you explained yourself. So you stopped over-explaining. And ironically, that silence became power. Because emotionally mature people don't waste their lives trying to force authenticity into spaces addicted to performance. They simply observe, detach, and protect their peace. That's the evolution pretenders fear most. Not your anger, not revenge, not conflict, your indifference to fake validation. The moment you stop needing approval from people who lack integrity, their influence over you collapses completely. And suddenly, the same people who once mocked your authenticity start watching you differently. Because while they exhausted themselves maintaining appearances, you built an identity rooted in truth. And truth ages well. Truth stays steady. Truth doesn't panic when masks begin falling off around it. So if you've been feeling isolated lately, don't automatically interpret that as rejection. Sometimes separation is divine protection. Sometimes life removes you from performative environments because your spirit has outgrown them. And despite how painful that journey felt at times, look at yourself now. More discerning, more grounded, more emotionally free. That's not weakness. That's transformation.